All right, students, the second part of chapter 16 is about the actual people who were the abolitionists. And again, my formatting is not the best here. We'll do what we can with it, but some of the pictures in some of these frames are going to be a little bit cut off, I'm afraid. Okay, most anti-slavery groups in the beginning thought that slavery could be gotten rid of slowly over time, but that was not the case, obviously. Beginning back in 1808, slavery had been banned in the Constitution with the Three-Fifths Compromise. And most people, no, not most, but many people thought that slavery would die out on its own. But by the early 1800s, most northern states had already banned slavery, and Quakers were among the earliest people to actually just really frown upon it and consider it completely immoral. But the fact was, it didn't die out over time. In fact, with the invention of the cotton gin, cotton spread across the South and it became known as the Cotton Kingdom over time. I have a graph here to show you that as the growth of cotton as a cash crop increased, the demand for slave labor increased with the use of the cotton gin. So the red line on the graph is cotton production in bales, and the blue line on the graph is slave population. And across the bottom, and it's kind of hard to see because it's a little bit pixelated, but the last year on the graph is 1860. By 1860, there were 4 million people enslaved across the South. So it was doing the opposite of dying out. And people who were obviously morally against slavery saw that it was a horrible thing and it wasn't going away, only getting worse. So some early plans to help slaves or help free slaves dealt with colonization. I have a little map of Africa that's cut off a little bit, but you can see the red dot on the map. And the red dot is a place called Liberia. And Liberia was actually purchased by people in the United States as a place that slaves could go to once they were freed. It wasn't a question of kicking them out, but you know, some Northerners, like it says in the first bullet point, even though Northerners don't own slaves, they believe in the legality of slavery because it's written in the Constitution. And so they wonder what is going to happen to the slaves if they're freed. Even if we buy their freedom for them, what happens to them then? Will they want to even stay there? Because who would want to stay in a place where you've been enslaved? I mean, some of them might want to come to the north, but some of them might want to just leave the country. And if they did leave the country, they would maybe want to go back to Africa where they had come from, or their ancestors at the very least had come from. And so I don't want you to view this as a place that they bought this piece of Africa to kick the slaves out to. That wasn't it. They bought this piece of Africa so that the slaves could go back there, if they wanted to, because they worried that these people, once they were freed, they are not able to read and write, which they could be taught to do that, but that would take time. And they don't have any skills except the skills that their owners had allowed them to learn, and usually agricultural skills. So there was concern about that. And also, would these people even want to stay? So that's why Liberia was purchased. And actually, at some point, some of the slaves did actually opt to go back to Liberia. The Northerners, bought boats and bought, captains to sail them over there. And some did opt to leave, and you can certainly understand why. All right. So it's, so the Constitution is signed and ratified in the 1790s, and by the 1830s, people are losing patience with this whole concept that slavery is going to die out because they can see it's not, even by the 1830s. You need to know this man, William Lloyd Garrison. By the time I post this, you will already be well aware that you need to know him. He was one of the very first people to publish an anti-slavery newspaper. It's called The Liberator, and you need to be able to put him together with that newspaper. And he is calling for the immediate release of slaves, not a question of phasing it out over time. We're not caring about the impact on the Southern economy. We're not worrying about whether they have skills or not. We'll address that when the time comes, but he wants the immediate release of slaves, period. And he starts something called the New England Anti-Slavery Society, which is secondary. You need to know him mostly as the founder of this anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator. These two sisters at the bottom are very scary-looking people, but they were from a very wealthy slaveholding South Carolina family. But they moved from there to the north and began to crusade for women's rights and mostly against slavery. And as they, grew older, because in this picture they're obviously not young women, they're sisters. And as they grew older, they had gotten married and whatnot, but they, their parents died and they inherit some of the family fortune, obviously. And when they met with the people who were, doling out the family money and family land, instead of taking their inheritance in land or money, they asked for that inheritance in slaves. They said, just give us the amount that we are owed in slaves. And of course, then they would turn around and free those slaves. So they put their lives on, they didn't put their lives on the line like their lives weren't being threatened, but they lived the talk. They were anti-slavery and they gave up a cush life to go and crusade against slavery. And they spent their lives doing it. They also helped to publish this book called American Slavery, which was a powerful abolitionist book, but you need to know them mostly for the rest of their life and the tale of the rest of their lives, not so much about this book that they published. Okay, I'm going to stop here with Uncle Tom's Cabin, because even though this is a short screencast, if I do the whole screencast, it's going to be way too long. So I'm going to stop here and come back and make a new one.